Security headlines.
PyTorch discloses malicious dependency chain compromise over the holidays. Ransomware gang clones victim's website to leak stolen data. And Lockbit gang apologizes and gives hospital free decrypter. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and expertise on these stories from our guest, Bryan Willett, CISO at Lexmark. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. Our sponsor for today is App Omni. It's time to secure your SaaS data. Join us live on YouTube. Just go to CISOSeries.com, hit the events dropdown, and look for the cybersecurity headlines we can review image. It's the third one down. Just click to join us, but we've only got 20 minutes, so we are going to jump right in. All right, our first story. PyTorch discloses malicious dependency chain compromise over the holidays. PyTorch, the open source machine learning framework, has identified a malicious dependency with the same name as the framework's Torch Triton library. This has led to a successful compromise as a dependency confusion attack vector. PyTorch admins are warning users who installed PyTorch nightly over the holidays, specifically between December 25th and 30th, to uninstall the framework and the counterfeit Torch Triton dependency. So, Bryan, a couple of issues here. The first one that seems to jump out is the confusion attack vector technique, but also the timing being one of the many attacks, coming over the holidays. And I guess I'll throw the supply chain element in for good measure. What's your take on these?
Well, so a couple things. One, being an engineer who's developing code can be a lot of fun, right? You can get out there, you can really develop some amazing things. You have this awesome open source community out there to really accelerate how quickly you can develop things. But what we forget many times is the hard part of developing, and that is really understanding what you're pulling into your software supply chain, making sure that what you pull in has good hygiene, right? It's being supported. Making sure you understand the dependency tree. And this is another great example of getting taken advantage of in that space. Now, in this case, it was the publishers of this particular library that had not done the proper reservations of the dependencies that were sitting underneath. But this isn't the first one. It won't be the last one where you have a build of materials that you are pulling in. You may not know what is included in that. And this is where we have to remind our developers, guys, this is the hard part of your job. We need you to make sure that you understand what you're pulling into this product and that you're maintaining this product appropriately. And when we talk about software build of materials, which has been, of course, big news in 2022, I'm sure it will continue in 23, this is a big part of why everybody wants that. Now, the hard part is how are we going to absorb it and use it? But that's the big thing. So, really, for those listening, this is yet another call. Get your developers to understand what they're using, why they're using it, and stay on top of it.
Yeah, agreed there. There's a lot of code out there too, so it's not an easy job, but it's important, to stay on top of those things. So, I mean, do you think developers get a bad rap at all? They do have a tough job. They get a lot of finger pointing, I think, from the security community. What's your thought on that?
They do, and I like to call it a healthy tension, right? There's always a healthy tension between the security team and the development team. However, when we cast forward of what does security look like in the future, my hope is that the academic space does a better job of training what security means to a development community. And as developers go into writing their code, they take those principles and it's built into how they design code. They have that shift left mentality of understanding the risk with whatever they're pulling in and designing appropriately around that and minimizing the risk of the end product. And I'll throw one thing in here. I was talking with my some developers at Lexmark about this particular one, And one of them threw back a presentation that Kelsey Hightower did at the Strange Loop conference on supply chain security. And if you guys haven't seen it, he did a fantastic job. And by the way, he's quite as a programmer, right? He's quite a humorous dude. And if you guys you can YouTube it, find it. I'm sure we can put a link out there for it. But he does an excellent job of presenting the challenges, presenting the build a material challenges, and presenting some ideas on how to go about those. They may not fit for everyone listening, but it gets you thinking.
Awesome. Great insight there. And we will put a link to that in the show notes. So thanks for the call out there, Brian. Moving on to the next story. Ransomware gang cloned victim's website to leak stolen data. The Elf V ransomware gang, known as Black Cat, is known for testing new extortion tactics. And on December 26th, they took it into a new level by duplicating their victim's website and posting the stolen data right there. Excuse me. This was done to ensure the data was widely available, and they took this turn instead of posting the data on the dark web. So, Brian, it's hard to say if this is really a triumph and a new, a great new technique from the threat actors, or do you see this more as an act of desperation? But also as a CISO, how do you plan for a situation like this?
Well, I view this as taunting, right? This is really them taunting the victim here, and it's really more the same. You look at the tools that are out there today that make it super easy for an attacker to clone a website. Um, they're used regularly in phishing and for credential theft, and this is more the same. They took it, they customized it to organize the victim's data, and
there we are. Just saying, threat actors are not nice people.
No, they're not, and they're going to do anything they can, right? They have a business model. They're going to do anything they can to try to get your data, and this is a taunt to go do that. I worry more about the data itself, right? I worry less in my role. I worry less about what they're doing in terms of that. I worry about what is the data, what is the risk associated with that data. How could it impact my business operations, either short term or long term? How does it impact my customers as I might look at data that could be compromised? So I would encourage anyone who is the unfortunate victim of that to try not to let that distract your attention and focus on the data and then getting your systems restored.
All right. Great advice. And so let's move on to our third story here. Lockbit gang apologizes and gives sick kids hospital free decrypter. The Lockbit ransomware gang has apologized to Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children after one of its members violated rules by hitting it with ransomware. The gang gave the hospital a decrypter and its apology and blamed a partner who, quote, violated our rules, is blocked and no longer in our affiliate program, end quote. So, Brian, the phrase honor among thieves definitely comes to mind here. This isn't the first time we've seen gangs trying to adhere to rules of engagement. Not exactly a Hallmark holiday special material, but what are your thoughts on this scenario and Lockbit's apology?
Well, I guess it's good that the ransomware gang at least has some level of ethics associated to them. In the end, ransomware is a business, and these groups know what is good and bad for their business. And this is just an example that they recognize if they're doing harm to a community that is going to get a lot of sympathy from the broader public, it's going to hurt their business as well, right? It's going to challenge them in terms of getting the extortions that they want. So I see it as a business decision that they made.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it seems like these ransomware gangs are becoming more sophisticated and really more operationalized. So they really are their own business now. And this seems like almost an HR type of move of sort of reprimanding the behavior of one of its affiliates. So it was very interesting.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the next story. Nearly 20 car manufacturers potentially exposed PII. In November, researchers discovered significant API vulnerabilities in the technologies of well-known vehicle brands, including BMW, Rolls-Royce, Mercedes-Benz, Ferrari, Porsche, Jaguar, and many others. You might have heard of some of those. The flaws could allow a threat actor to unlock, start, and track cars, as well as expose personally identifiable information of customers. The most severe API flaws were found in BMW and Mercedes-Benz, which allowed access to internal systems. Ferrari's problems made it possible to modify and delete any Ferrari customer account, manage their vehicle profile, or set themselves as the car owner. So, Bryan, first off, does this story make you concerned about your own Ferrari? That would be the first question.
I wish. If only you saw my 20-year-old truck sitting outside.
and I mean, these autos, right? They're basically becoming rolling entertainment systems, Internet of Things. What are your thoughts on, again, it's always pushing out the functionality right before we are concerned about the security. This kind of puts cold water in the face a little bit.
Yeah. So when I look at this, I see not just the car industry, but if you go to any IoT industry where you've got a legacy company, right? A company that has a lot of technical, I'll call it technical debt, but history in building out business systems. And then they see a market force come in this case, like a Tesla, right? A market force comes in that is, in Tesla's case, really is a technology company that sells cars. And they see that as a major disruptor. They're pushed to move fast. And when they move fast, they have to do so on a foundation that is just not ready. They have not built the automation, the identity and access management systems, et cetera, to support the type of customer relationship that they're looking at now, where not only is it those systems providing, whether it be customer and partner portals, right, to help with servicing of those devices, but now providing that control of the vehicle itself. And when you look at the level of access that they gained in an individual's car, being able to potentially shut it down, right? That now becomes concerning. And so when a company is looking at making disruptive innovation like that in an organization that has historically been, in this case in the car industry, that is a legacy manufacturing industry, they might want to consider doing this as almost a new build, right? Don't connect it or minimally connect it to your legacy systems, such that you minimize the risk of cross contamination, so to speak, in that new system. I think we're going to see more of this, and the research that this team is doing in the automotive industry is going to be ripe for finding more issues like this, just because of the old iron meets the new technology.
Yeah, super interesting use case. You definitely know the value of the asset. It's a little easier to put value on a car than it is, data or operations sometimes. But interesting. We could spend a whole episode on that one for sure. Very interesting. So let's move on. I just want to spend a few moments with our sponsor for today, App Omni. Did you know that over half of companies have sensitive SaaS data exposed on the public internet? And many breaches making headlines now involve SaaS apps. App Omni can help. App Omni identifies misconfigurations and guides remediation to keep your SaaS data secure. We help security teams make sense of data access permissions, third-party app visibility, and threat detection across their entire SaaS ecosystem. Get started at appomni.com. That's appomni.com. All right, on to our next story. Flipper's zero phishing attacks target InfoSec community. The new phishing campaign is exploiting the security community's growing interest in a hacking tool called Flipper Zero. Flipper Zero is a portable, multifunctional cybersecurity tool for pen testers and hacking enthusiasts. It offers support for RFID emulation, digital access key cloning, radio communications, NFC infrared, and Bluetooth, threat actors are taking advantage of the popular tool and its scarce availability by creating fake Twitter accounts and phishing stores. So scamming 101, using supply and demand to create sense of urgency. What are your thoughts on turning the tables, I guess, on the infosec community as well?
Well, if so, a few people on my team did actually get one of these, one of the flipper devices, and I almost see this as being very similar to Raspberry Pi when it came out, just specific to the hacker community. Um, from a piece of hardware perspective, it's a well-built piece of hardware. It has some fundamental capabilities and it has expansion capabilities. But what I think is interesting and something that we need to pay attention to here is it potentially presents a platform that people can coalesce around in terms of developing tools and modules, right? Expansion modules to sit on top that that could really grow in terms of open sourcing the hacking capabilities. And you know, when you look at its capabilities just out of box of being able to go after kind of legacy garage doors, being able to emulate prox badges, um, being able to change channels at your favorite bar, right? I mean, those are nuisance items. Hopefully, people are looking at their old garage doors, and hopefully, organizations are getting rid of their prox badges if they still have them. But as being a platform that individuals can iterate on and focus on and develop on, like the Raspberry Pi has been, and you know, you go back to the first topic we talked about, PyTorch. Well, it came from PyPi, which was for Raspberry Pis, right? You could see that exact same thing happen in this space. So I think it's a place that us as security professionals need to watch how it progresses. At the same time, in the pen tester community, it could really help them significantly in quickly going and testing outside of the areas they may typically focus in.
Yeah, the tools, I mean, they're there, right? And innovation can happen for the good guys and the bad guys. So it is interesting to see a story like this. We've got a couple of comments that have rolled in. I think this in response, Brian, to your last comment from Chris Raber, old iron meeting new iron.
Yeah,
Good one. And James Olson really talked about the emphasis and need to focus on data privacy in 2023.
I
Um,
agree.
and so I would second that as well. And thank you for the comments. Let's go ahead and move on to our next story. NATO tests AI's ability to protect critical infrastructure against cyber attacks. An international experiment conducted at NATO's Cyber Coalition event late last year suggests that AI can act without human intervention to identify critical infrastructure cyber attack patterns and detect malware to enable enhanced decision making about defensive responsive. If that wasn't scary, responses, excuse me, if that wasn't scary enough, it comes with on the heels of a new government report that warns of numerous government entities flying blind on critical infrastructure security, having failed to implement most recommendations related to protecting critical infrastructure since 2010. Yikes, 2010. Hashtag Windows 10 upgrades, right? That we're
Yes.
still working on. But I mean, what do you make of the idea of AI taking care of infrastructure threat detection, Brian? Or, the fact that we're a decade behind where we really should be in terms of protecting infrastructure?
Um, in the U.S. government, and honestly, even in we'll use the term again, old iron. Being 10 years behind does not surprise me. When you get into the OT space, the manufacturing space, even some companies just have legacy mainframe systems that are core to their business, and the expense to upgrade those is significant, and it takes time. So that doesn't surprise me. Now, the thought that AI could lay on top of the network and be the one tool to help save you would be awesome. I'm always skeptical of that. Um, when it comes uh, to protecting the environment, I think people, process come first, and then tool. Um, but you know what I read out of that particular article and the benefits that it provided. One, being successful at helping thwart the attacks. That's promising, right? It
Mhm.
Time will tell. Maybe this really is a benefit or a a differentiator, market mover in this space. The other is um, that that well, I forgot what I was going to say.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, it is like you said. It's a definitely a combination here of kind of moving moving forward with technology, but also like catching up, right? With trying to get your defenses
It
in place.
it is, and actually, one thing I will say, we started to see AI built into some of the tools that we use today. You look at EDR, you look at your firewalls, you're starting to see some of that rolled into it. This is
Yep.
interesting because it sits on top. And what I was going to say, it provides that great clarity, that mapping of what's going on in your network and where your risk may be. Um, I think the thing we have to keep in mind is the attackers are doing the same thing. So this is a arms race, and we have to keep that in mind, that it requires that continued investment to make sure you're keeping up with this arms race. Because if you don't keep up, in the words of Mr. T, I pity the fool that doesn't do
Wow.
what they need to do, to keep up with the arms race, because they're going to struggle. They're really going to struggle.
I love that. Bringing out the Mr. T quotes too.
Yeah.
Bonus points for that. All right, let's move on to our last story of the day. Slack's private GitHub code repositories stolen over the holidays. The incident involves threat actors gaining access to Slack's externally hosted GitHub repositories via a limited number of Slack employee tokens that were stolen. While some of Slack's private code repositories were breached, Slack's primary code base and customer data remain unaffected, according to the company. There is no indication that sensitive files, areas of Slack's environment, including production, were accessed. So, Bryan, we hear these reassuring voices, of course, from the victim. Don't want to be punitive here either, but we see these types of breaches happening. Slack, lots of people use it. I may have used it earlier today. What's your take on this one?
Well, it worries me a little, and the reason it worries me is the very thing you just mentioned. We have a lot of people who are using it. I think that a lot of organizations are integrated in with Slack a lot more than they might want to believe. And when we get a cryptic response out of the company um, that I would argue right now is not as transparent as I would like to see, um, and given uh, the other breaches that have been announced recently, most notably over the holidays last pass, which started back in April and then got updated again in August, and then again, right, was updated to say they did get access to customer vaults uh, in December, right before Christmas. Right, this type of cryptic response, when you're dealing with a platform that is heavily used by a lot of the people in the industry and just people, right, just families even talking to each other. Um, I really think that the organization needs to build more trust in us, or with us, and that would be my call out. Right,
Yep.
build the trust, be transparent, give us more idea what's going on so that we can make the risk call and decide how we're going to move forward.
Yep. I'm glad you threaded in the last pass there too, because I definitely see some of the similarities there where you're trying to build the trust. And these are, ongoing developments, and we'll all stay tuned as they do develop. Shay Christensen, I'll just say, loved your Mr. T reference as well. So after my own heart. um,
Yeah.
that brings us to the end of the show. It goes really quick, but Bryan, any thumbs up or eye roller stories for here? Anything jumped out to you in the stories we reviewed today?
Well, the one I'm watching closely is LastPass. I mean, that is definitely one that I'm watching, and hope that it's nothing more than what they described, but we'll see.
Sounds good. And where can people find you if they are so inclined to reach out?
I am always on LinkedIn.
I've heard of it. And there is Bryan's LinkedIn tag. So thank you. Thanks to Bryan Willett, CISO at Lexmark, for joining us today. It was a great conversation. Thanks also to our sponsor, App Omni. It's time to secure your SaaS data. And there will be no Super Cyber Friday next week. However, you can still get our daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every weekday in just 6 minutes. And if you're traveling to Clearwater, Florida next week, the CISO Series will be opening act for the Convene conference on Tuesday, January 10th. And we'd love to see you there. So you can find out more by going to CISOseries.com and hitting the events dropdown. You can also subscribe to the show via the newsletter on LinkedIn, where you can read and or listen to the show. Just go to CISO Series page on LinkedIn to subscribe. Thanks as always for joining us. I'm Sean Kelly. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.